This is Andrew Whitstadt, and you were listening to Heavy Board. And we're recording this on February 3rd, 2026. Author and podcaster Brad Kelly is back on the show today, and he has a new novel out, The Earthen Dark, a unique sci-fi noir style novel that Brad has been working on for years. And of course, it is linked below, listeners. Brad also spent about 2 years trying to publish the novel through mid-sized presses, small presses, soliciting agents for the big five presses, and then settled on self-publishing his second novel, just as he did for his first novel, House of Sleep, also linked below, listeners. And he is here today to talk about the novel, his decision to publish the book himself, his inspirations for the novel, and his love of noir and sci-fi literature, as well as anything else that comes up in this crazy literary scene we find ourselves in. Brad Kelly, welcome back to Heavy Board.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate this. We've talked a few times and I always enjoy it. So this is the highlight of my day, if not my week, if not my month. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, that's what we like to hear on Heavy Board.
Yeah.
It's making Brad Kelly's month. He also launched a book in the last 30 days, listeners, but
Yeah,
we're
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
yeah. But that's
But
true. No, yeah.
the thing about putting the book out, and it's very exciting, and people who've read it enjoy it so far, and that's super rewarding, and I'm glad they're enjoying it. But there's also, you mentioned this years long process. There's also this sort of like uh you've kind of spent so much of your energy that once it's out, it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
reaction inside is sort of like, whew, okay, I'm done with that. That's cool.
On to the next. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so trying to, maintain my enthusiasm for I still think the book is good and I'm proud of it. But yeah, I'm sure there's some people out there who can relate. It's like you work on something for a long time and the feeling is just almost like relief in a certain sense that
Yeah.
now I don't have to deal with it at least on the same level as I was dealing with it on a daily basis before. So that's cool.
That brings up an interesting question where, I think Toni Morrison and some others have written essays about this. I think Toni Morrison called it like novel depression. Like once you're done with a project, there's like a moment of like depression, like once it's
Mhm.
like out, yeah, you're done with it. Did you have any of that, or you just always have
Yeah,
projects? And
yeah. I mean, I've always got like the next thing kind of lined up. For me, it's interesting because I finished the book in October of 2024 and then got working on other stuff. So to the extent that sort of some kind of depression followed finishing it, it was well over a year ago.
right.
Um, and I definitely feel a little bit of that. There is this interesting thing with writing in general that I think applies to not only like a, finishing a big project that takes years, but also like even just like a good day of writing. There's a kind of joy in and of itself, but then there's also this feeling of like, man, shouldn't like heavens be opening up or something? Like shouldn't like, instead it's like, oh, I gotta go scrape ice off my car again. So this is not to like downplay the joys of it, but it is funny how like how the sort of ecstasy and exhilaration of the whole thing sits right next to the sort of the banality of the everyday. But for me, I always had. I mean, I've got a bunch of projects lined. I've got them lined up one after the other for the most part. So it doesn't take too long until I'm sort of back at the writing desk working on something else. This, the thing that somebody like Toni Morrison never had to deal with was she didn't have to like design her own cover and do the typesetting and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's a lot
The
of stuff that she
layout.
didn't have
Yeah.
to, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that she didn't have to worry about and ordering proofs and it comes back and you're like, you know what? This would look a lot better if this thing was moved over about a quarter inch and then she didn't have to worry about all that stuff and more power to her. But that stuff does end up getting kind of tedious after a little while. Just kind of ticking all those boxes but
That's where the
I've
relief
had
comes in. Yeah. Like after
yeah,
it's like,
that's where like it's
yeah,
done.
yeah,
I don't have to worry
yeah.
about that anymore. And I try not to even look at the book too much because I'll spot something. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
good.
there's
It's good enough, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of like what's the saying, right? Art is never done, only abandoned, right? When you're doing that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's definitely true.
But listeners know this, and regular listeners will know Brad, and we've had several collaborations. Go back, listen to our first interview where we talk about his more personal life in the early childhood, like we do the heavy board treatment episode 106. Go listen to that, listeners, to get the full picture as well as the other collaborations Brad and I have done, on his show, Method and Madness. But I wanted to start, Brad, by just kind of asking about that little kernel that started this project. I guess it would be years ago at this point,
Mhm. Yeah.
what was the thing that started you on this path? Was there just an idea, something that happened while in the sewers, while working?
Yeah.
What was the spark that started this kind of like, this could be a story? And
Yeah.
then did it bloom to a novel? Did you always know it was going to be a novel? What was that little, if you could even answer that, if you could even
Yeah.
pinpoint a little kernel that was like, and then just the thread starts getting pulled out, how did you
Yeah.
start?
Yeah, no, I definitely know. So, in 2020 and 2021, um, well, I still have this job for the same company, but I do I have slightly different responsibilities than I used to. And there was a stretch of time where I was pretty regularly in the sewers of Detroit for inspection purposes. So, um, as an engineer, I wasn't doing a whole lot of physical labor, but I would be coming in, going out, doing long walks, doing inspections, measuring things, doing what they call engineer directed repairs, which is just like pointing at something and telling people to fix it, and spending quite a bit of time. And sometimes that meant I would just popped in and I was in and out. Sometimes that meant I was in there for a whole working day. And at its sort of peak, it was at least 4 days a week I was down. For a few months, the only time I wouldn't go in was when we couldn't get what they call flow control. They have to institute a number of measures to get the flow down low enough for you to go in there. And sometimes due to weather and other things, they can't do that. So that would be the only time I wouldn't go in for a while. And so in it's a strange environment down there. It's
Yeah.
disorienting for sure. I mean, it's disorienting spatially and in time. I think when I first got the sort of feeling I wanted to extract from the circumstance was did a long form inspection and walked like probably 2 miles in the sewer. And usually, how you do these, if you do these long inspections, is you go in at one spot and then you go downstream, and then they pull you out downstream. And you do that because there's no point in walking the same stretch twice. And also, walking upstream with sewage to your knees is a lot harder than walking downstream. So, but going in and then, walking 2 miles and then coming out and being like, man, it was sunny when I went in. It's raining now, and I do not recognize where I am. This is really, really weird. And just that sense of like real genuine disorientation and not knowing how long I'd been in there. If you'd asked me, I wouldn't have been accurate to the within an hour, like very, very disoriented. And that paired with the sort of latent claustrophobia of being in the pipe, which some people handle better than others. I always seem to do okay with it, but I'll tell you, I think everybody has their limit when it comes to that stuff. Like, even if you're not claustrophobic, you can get put into a situation where you will react like a claustrophobic. It might be time, it might be darkness, it might be how close the walls are or whatever, but at some point you'll react just like any, diagnosed claustrophobic. And so I wanted to capture that feeling as well. And then yeah, from there things sort of pick up inertia and pick up material on their own. You start, okay, well, who are the characters that I want to have in this scene or in this place? What is the actual thing that they've got to deal with? What's the actual story? It can't, for me anyway, I like a plot. It can't just be a circumstance where they're sort of in
Right.
there. And so it gradually kind of develops its own life after that. But yeah, it's interesting how, they do say like write what you know or whatever, but I've always taken that to be like not just, auto-fictionally just say what happened to you, but like pick stuff from your life that's genuine, the perspective that only you can have, or maybe only a small number of
Right.
people can have. And so that was sort of like take this environment that I know that most people aren't familiar with and let's find a story that works there, that appeals to me and has enough sort of internal energy that I can work on it for 2, 3, or 4 years or whatever it's going to take.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's also with this kind of like the way you were describing it, it almost reminded me of like when you're training to like scuba dive, they do kind of things
Mm.
like that even because once you get below, the first 100 feet, everything's dark, you can't see, and then
Yeah,
yeah, people get disoriented when they come back up type thing.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so crazy. But then I'm thinking about like the kind of the long literary tradition of caves and
Hmm.
hidden things beneath the cave,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. Yeah, like into the sewer lines, particularly those old
Yeah,
cities, you
yeah.
know?
This story it's like set in the modern day, but it's like sneakily is part of like the long tradition of subterranean fiction that goes all the way back to like ancient myth, basically. It's not in some ways that in that way it's not necessarily a new story, but I think it's still one that is compelling. It's sort of just in this modern quasi man-made environment. Um
And it's so
and the
beautiful for
yeah.
no, please, please.
Yeah, well, and in that environment, it does have this sort of, sure, it's man-made. The sewers, I've spent time in a bunch of different ones, but the ones that these are set in, they're 120 years old. They're not ruins because they're still in use, but if you go down there, how many other people have been down there? It's in the dozens maybe.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely it starts to get into that sort of spooky archaeological Lovecraftian territory, and that's before you even realize that a flotilla of shit is coming towards you.
Yeah. Yeah, that elevates it for sure. But then
Yeah.
even like I was just gonna say it's so beautiful, even going back to the myths where it's like, yeah, there's something inherently kind of spooky going underground, going into a cave, going into this dark place where you need lights, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can go all the way back through literature to have these kind of because in that cave there's something, even if it's like more metaphorical, right? You're facing yourself in the cave, kind of like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like there's always something like that. So that's great. You started it because Brad's day job, yeah, where he's always working in these sewers. How did this story blossom? Were you just like, all right, I want to capture this feeling? And I think that's a great place to start for a novel. Capture this
Yeah.
kind of disoriented, maybe even there's like a little forbidden, right? You're not supposed to go in the sewers, but like
Right.
unless it's your
Right.
job to do it, right? But like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
you're
Right.
not
Right.
supposed to go. Homeless people live in the sewers out here where I live.
Oh
Like
yeah,
there's
yeah,
like,
that's
yeah.
true. That's true. Where you're
Uh,
at, it's a different vibe. Yeah. I
It's
dare
and they're
them to try
newer.
it try it
Yeah,
here.
they're
Yeah.
much newer too. Yeah, so they're like poured concrete. They're not like the old school brick that's
Mhm.
crumbling and you have to go down there and fix.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, there's just something like I love that. That's just so inherent to story too. That these kind of this mystery cave or mystery tree house, whatever it is, the
Mhm.
mystery thing. But even in this case, it's not
Yeah.
even a mystery. It's a sewer, right? But then there's leads
Right.
to yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it
So how
gets
did you,
weirder.
yeah. So
Yeah.
how did you start pulling that thread? All right, you got this feeling that you wanted to capture, and then did you just start writing? Just start writing towards and follow whatever was coming, or
Yeah, more or less. I mean, there's for me, I've written a handful of novels. There's two of them out there now, but I've got, more in the drawer that aren't finished or whatever. And for me, there's always like a handful of images slash emotions or feelings or whatever you want to call them that are like that to me is like that's the DNA of the novel. That's what I'm trying to get the person who reads it to feel and sort of, I guess, visualize what I'm feeling and visualizing. That's got me sort of interested in this. So it's that. And then, from there it's like, okay, well, who are the characters that are going to be able to do something interesting in this space? And and then sort of what happens to them. So I always feel like there's this process of sort of just intuitive um, probing along through an idea, folded over with like very rational consideration. Like, okay, well, how many people should there be? Well, don't want to have too many characters because then it just becomes complicated. But I don't want to have just like one or two people because that's not quite as interesting. It doesn't give you enough sort of dynamic stuff happening. So, figuring out how many people should be in the sewer on the sewer crew and then sort of figuring out, okay, well, what kind of people should they be?
Right.
And, you want them to be different. You want all of your characters, if they're going to be any more than just background characters, you want them all to be different and have slightly different motivations, have slightly different backgrounds and that sort of thing. And then, from there, it's just like I was sort of like, once I figured out, oh, the thing is, when they come out of the sewer, it's not home anymore. They're in some other place. That took me about a year to like figure out, like, okay, well, what is happening to them then? What is this thing? What are the rules of it? I never really lay them out explicitly, but I know what they are. So figuring all that out is also sort of this folding together of a rational process and a kind of imaginal probing. When I first the earlier drafts of it, the main character, the main perspective character, Jim, was not this I think what I call him a disgraced anthropology professor, as it states on the back of the book. He was just another one of the guys. And I struggled. I, I mean, I always felt like a little bit of an outsider, somewhat in this sewer work environment. I was coming off of, I got an MFA in the humanities, and not that I'm unfamiliar with physical labor or the blue collar. I mean, that's where I come from originally. So it's not none of it's super foreign, but it is a little odd to be going down into these spaces after, you spent 11 years in college. Uh, Um, and so I realized, eventually I realized I needed a sort of fish out of water character. And I was like, okay, well, what would be the most interesting fish out of water character, right? And figuring out, well, what is their background? How does their background play with the setting in an interesting and perhaps fruitful and even at times ironic way? And then like what's going on with him? Why is he here? Why did he end up here? And then the story ends up kind of gathering its own momentum. So yeah, it's really, I mean, this is what to me is fascinating about the
Yeah.
novel writing process and why I'm always going to do it because it's a little bit of everything. It's if you want to write poetry, you're going to spend some time doing that. If you want to direct movie scenes in your head, you're going to be doing some of that. If you want to spend endless hours researching something that's got like a technical aspect to it or a historical aspect, you're going to be doing that. So, um, yeah, it's quite a ride, man. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was just thinking too, because I was one of my questions, yeah, about particularly the Jim character with the kind of it is this kind of not so deep as a cultural clash, but it is kind of like a class clash with this kind of
Mhm.
yeah, white collar and blue collar where he's kind of put into this position. You meet him, as he's kind of I guess we meet him like a week in, to this job at Post, and we don't know why he was kind of disgraced, but we find out, and it's kind of
Yeah.
this. It is kind of he quite doesn't feel like he fits in, even just the way he talks, is a different language that he's using talking to these the
Hmm.
blue collar guys that are yeah, just there to drill the holes or whatever, but they need the
Right.
engineer to tell them
Yeah.
if it's gonna
Yeah.
collapse the entire structure or not.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean that's beautiful, and it doesn't hit you over the head with it, right? You're just kind of it's just an interesting, more dynamic that's laid on top of the story, uh, and it works, yeah. And I wanted to ask you specifically about the Jim being a former academic, forced
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Sure.
What
Yeah.
was that something you wanted to portray in the book, or like you said, it was just something that like, happened as you kind of the story was
Y-
evolving. You're like, I need him to have a little bit more contrast, or
Yeah.
was it just something you were
Yeah,
thinking about?
I think it started out just wanting to be some more contrast, but then I was really interested in, I mean, I guess we can say it. He gets canceled, but he's also he he never really did anything wrong,
Right.
really. The thing he did wrong was he didn't stand up for himself, which I guess if you want to get like my take on the cancel culture, it's at least sometimes that where it's
Yeah.
just like, hey, just tell people to, tell people to go pound sand. You know, it's a, and again, it's not always that. People were quote unquote canceled and like had opportunities just taken away from them.
Right.
But in a more general, in a sort of more general attitude, it's sort of like, hey, maybe we just like get a little bit of a spine. And that's sort of Jim's problem is he doesn't really have any ability to stand up for himself. And I found it, you know, honestly, the first thing that sort of causes the avalanche of complaints against him is a real thing. There was a professor, and I don't remember where it is now, but he called he's a white dude, and he called some African American girl the wrong name. And then he was so embarrassed that like before anybody did anything, he just resigned. And it was like, dude, like just apologize. Be like, man, I feel really bad that I screwed up. I got a lot of students, you know, haha. Like
Yeah.
like he was so like he was so ridden with this guilt or whatever it is that he just rolled and in that circumstance like it didn't even get presented to him in this real world scenario. I'm not talking in the book. The guy who really did this, like, again, no, he didn't get like investigated by a board. There was no like reprimand. He was just resigned. He just he couldn't handle a second of you know, possibly his reputation or whatever being under scrutiny. So anyway, so those kinds of stories, I was like, how can I sort of bring this to bear without it being a book about that? I really think it takes up very little page space in The Earth and Dark, all of this stuff. You know, I think if there's like I think there's probably one chapter, if it were to fall out of the book, you wouldn't even know that this book includes this
Right.
this sort of cancel culture academia stuff. But it is interesting, and I think relevant, maybe not quite as relevant as it was a few years ago, but I think it's still relevant.
Yeah. I mean, when that was all happening, I mean, there were people that were tenured at prestigious colleges that were like driving buses now all of a sudden because of the kind
Mhm.
of the Me Too stuff and all of that. Yeah, the
Yeah,
cancel
yeah,
campaigns that were going around.
yeah,
So
yeah.
very real, and it just adds another layer. Yeah, it just adds another layer for character and yeah, something that's going on in the background on top of the story, which, as we all know, is part of the fun
Mhm.
of doing that. I wanted to ask, you know, about inspirations for this beyond that, in terms of like, you know, author and story. And I know we covered your kind of
Yeah,
go-to favorite authors in the previous episode. Again, go listen to that, listeners.
sure.
Uh, but I wanted to ask, yeah, was there a novel, a movie, a story, an author, anything that you were doing to like as you were writing this? I'm the type of person that if I'm working on something and I've been reading somebody, I have like
Yeah.
very stickler, like I can't change now. I have to read. I just got to keep reading them, you know. So I'll just read whatever, like, everything they have, even if it's not as good, just to stay in that
Yeah.
headspace. Was there anything like that, or anything that was guiding you a little bit, or just something like that? I don't know. I mean, I feel like we all kind of
Yeah.
blend things together in our head and then it comes
Yeah,
out, but.
I think at this point I'm really kind of blending a lot of stuff in my head. However, at the same time, I did sort of stylistically, I did have, and it's funny because I used to hate the this notion that you were supposed to do this. You know, this idea of comps that like you're supposed to. Well, it's if you know,
Right.
I don't know if uh, Breaking Bad took place on the moon or whatever,
Right.
and I used to kind of hate that stuff, and then yet and at the same time, something occurred to me that like, all right, what if I was like Cormac McCarthy and Jorge Luis Borges teamed up to write a piece of like 1920s pulp? Was kind of what I was going for. Like something that would go in weird tales. And then it sort of like got out of hand and turned into a book set in 2025 or whatever. So that was sort of where my head was at, was trying to like keep these three things like in check and like write something that would appeal to people who are fans of any one or all three of those things, I suppose. So that was kind of big, but yeah, in terms of like specific works, not really. I mean, I had yeah, not yeah, it's so diffuse, I guess.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah, yeah.
lot of inspirations, but they're so like diffused throughout it that it's hard to really pinpoint any specific one.
And I know this is a tough one to answer. Were there any like places where like, you know, maybe you were stuck or you were just kind of like trying to figure out the next sequence or something, and it just like
Mhm.
you like went back to yeah, like Cormac or Voorhees or something or anything like that, or yeah, I don't know. Was that
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely had a couple spots where, in particular, I was like, "What would Borges do?" I think I even had a
Yeah.
little post-it note at one point hanging on my monitor, which was like, "What is that? WW JLBD," right? Like, what would Jorge Luis Borges do? And I don't know how, I don't know how I'm not as smart as he is, so it probably doesn't quite live up to that. But it did that as a sort of mantra to have occasionally allowed me to like um really take some turns that
Right.
into what I think were like a more creative or philosophically, at least to me, philosophically interesting space. And so it was like I had these moments where it was like, should I do that? That seems kind of insane. And then I was like, well, what would Borges do? Borges would probably make it even weirder than that. So so it was like, okay, that's permission. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely that was sort of my, you know, this is I think a thing that can be difficult as a writer is like you're trying to like you don't want to like cater too much to the audience, except in a general way. Like, is this going to be interesting? But then, like, you have to be careful that that force doesn't prevent you from like taking some leaps that might seem paradoxical or too weird, Like it's hard trying to keep those two things in balance is fun and interesting, but it is a bit of a challenge sometimes. Like, is this going to be so weird it's sort of distracting and it
Right.
like it pulls people out of immersion, or can I pull it off kind of thing.
With Borges
So
especially,
that
there's always this kind of like um to call, for lack of a better term, I would call it like abstract absurdism. But
Mhm.
it's but he does it so tastefully like that it works, you know? Like yeah, that's a
Yeah.
quite challenging thing to word. Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
ambitious, Brad. That's an
Yeah.
ambitious yeah, that's an ambitious thing.
Yeah.
And then more generally here, and kind of, I wanted to ask you both just about the genres, is you're kind of blending genres. You're blending a little
Yeah.
sci-fi, you're blending a little pulp and noir. I just wanted
Mhm.
to ask you, what do you think it is about sci-fi that draws you in as a reader or a lover of story and literature? And this is again, and I know a big question, so please, answer
Sure.
however you want. And then I'm gonna the same thing for pulp once we get through sci-fi, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote in a realistic sort of tradition, literary realism tradition for a long time. And House of Sleep kind of it veers out of realism, but there remains this sort of like scintilla of doubt about whether it's actually in sort of supernatural territory or whatever. And this Earth and Dark is in supernatural territory, like unless you're just going to say the whole thing's a dream, and it is, whatever. But like basically, if you're going to accept that what happens on the page happened, then it's in supernatural territory. Um, and I always was into things like X-Files and cryptids and stuff like that. I was sort of always interested in it, and I think I kind of got it trained out of me as territory for writing. For because I went to an MFA program and stuff, and
Right,
they're just shoving like great work, but they're shoving Raymond Carver at you, and like I think
right,
I kind of let that stuff get into my head a bit more than it should have. Just in the last sort of few years, 5 to 10 years, I just accepted that like actually the milieu I want to work in is in outs drawing outside of the lines of realism. And part of that is, and I'm not the first person to come up with this, but literary realism isn't particularly realistic either. Like there are framed up situations. Like if you watch a romantic comedy, is that actually more realistic than Star Wars? I
right.
mean, I kind of I guess, but in a lot of ways it's not actually that much more realistic actually. Um, and so that recognizing that realism isn't all that realistic either, allowed me to kind of open up to that. And then frankly, I also realized that life isn't all that realistic either. There is some weird stuff out there. Like I tried to like rationalize away a lot of the weird things about reality and life, and have eventually come around to accept that they can't all be rationalized away. Um, and so for me, I want to operate in that supernatural sci-fi, whatever territory, because I actually think that allows you to say something perhaps a little more bracing about what reality is and about what life is. So I don't know if that's what appeals to most people about it. I think a lot of people enjoy the sort of flights of fancy and like
Right.
the imagination, going into the land of imagination, which is cool too. I like doing that as well. Um, but I'm always, I guess, trying to like figure in an indirect way or figure something else out with it.
Right. A
Yeah.
grounding in something, because,
R
it's
right.
always interesting with that. I mean, the reason I bring up Vonnegut here is The Breakfast of Champions, one of my favorite Vonnegut books, is
Mhm.
because there's something about sci-fi in particular where it allows you to take, okay, here is the world that everybody's familiar with, the world that we call ourselves real life or something, we'd call it.
Yeah.
And then the sci-fi allows you to take that and really do whatever you want with it. So like, you come up with a weird name or something, and this is, traditional sci-fi for like whatever, a gun or something. They have a different name for a gun than we do, and that
Right.
juxtaposition makes it, maybe it even functions like shoots lasers or something, right? Instead of bullets, and it kind
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
gives you kind of a fantasy or allows the reader to be drawn in that way. Yeah, it's just a
Mm.
great way to do it. And
Yeah.
that's why I bring out Breakfast of Champions, because he's writing it as if he's writing it to aliens. So he's explaining everything on Earth,
Right.
like
Right. I
guns
forgot
and
about
yeah,
that
what
part.
all that stuff
Yeah.
is, which is what
Yeah.
makes it funny too, because it's almost the opposite, like pretending that the alien culture is the normal culture, and like, you have to explain our
Right.
culture to them. Yeah. So it's
Uh,
this.
yeah, presenting our culture as though it's like a science fiction scenario. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I
And then
love that.
there's
That's
maybe
hilarious.
even the same thing as like a mystery thing to it too. Like you said, the
Mhm.
cave, the hole in the ground, even if you look at like kind of the magical realism style shows and stuff that are big and on TV now. I mean, even
Mhm.
Stranger Things or something. I mean, these things that they get to go into the ground in this little thing and find a little secret passage, or, all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
yeah,
There's just something very enticing about that. And we call it sci-fi, but of course you could use it in all these different ways too. But like it's
yeah.
just, yeah, so I was just curious
Sure.
what you
Yeah,
find out of it.
yeah,
And then okay, same question for the pulp stuff too, because then
yeah,
the same type of thing where there's an enticing thing to it. What draws you into pulp as, yeah, as a writer of it, as a reader, a lover of it, how
yeah,
would you say, what is the thing that's like, I can't put these things down. I just love them. 'Cause I'm the same way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I read a couple things about pulp that in the last few years, as I kind of spent more time reading it and thinking about the people who were making it. There's, and this is, there's So in America like invented the blues and invented jazz, that's kind of not accurate because it's got all
Right.
these influences from European musical traditions and African musical traditions or whatever. But it's like America, okay, America invented the blues. I think that the pulps, despite the contributions of many great Englishmen and Europeans, I think the starting sort of with Edgar Allan Poe and then going through Weird Tales, the pulps are like the literary version of the blues in that they're this American sort of amalgamation of influences and references and its sort of own history, and then it's targeted like directly at like the common man, more or less, right? And it ends up appealing to all strata of society potentially, but the blues is pretty simple, but it kind of goes right to the heart of things. I think of the pulps as similar to, as operating similar to that in a lot of ways, but in the literary side of things. But that metaphor or that analogy goes a little bit further because just as like the blues eventually influenced rock and roll and then influenced rhythm and blues and then that influenced hip hop and like it's all there's like a straight line from all the blues greats of the early 20th century to like stuff that's relatively recent. The pulps became Hollywood
Right.
effectively,
Yeah.
in an indirect way. Not all the same people and players, but all that stuff is all the tropes and conventions and where at what level of society do you target as your audience and all of that. That's mainstream cinema
Yeah.
effectively, and so. getting to the pulps, I think gets you into some like core DNA of like what American storytelling is all about. And so I mean, that's part of why I love it. That's the nerdy English major explanation of why I love it. The more, the more just on the face of it reason I love it is just because it's weird and it's scary and it's dreamy and it makes the world seem like a more mysterious place and kind of remystifies the world a little bit to spend some time in there. And yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I just it's got that it's and I don't love all of it. I've read a bunch of pulp stuff that I'm like, this is, this could have used an edit or four edits maybe,
Yeah.
like this is you had like one good idea in there and the rest of this is kind of garbage. But when you get to the best of it, it's these amazing feats of imagination and like real brass tacks storytelling. Like Robert E. Howard, if he would have lived longer, nobody was going to give him a Nobel Prize. But the guy could write, and the
Right.
stuff is engaging. And as a writer, you could learn a lot from it about just how to make people turn the pages. And you can decide that the content is juvenile or whatever. But yeah, the guy knew how to tell a story. And so that as time has gone on too, this is something else I had to like unlearn from my more sort of MFA days was like, no, the metric of a piece of fiction is whether people want to turn the page or not. That's what ultimately matters. And then if you can get them to do that, you can do anything you want as long as
Right.
they do that. And that's something I picked up from I really thought about the pulps in that context too. It's like it's just about getting them to flip to the next page and getting people to get lost in it.
Yeah.
And that's has things to do with pace and plotting and how one scene moves into the next and all of that, which I think in literary realism is often there, but gets kind of lost in this sort of like atmospheric sort of thing where it's like we'll have a story, but not really anything, not that much really happens, or maybe one thing happens, and it's more about how it's observed. Um, I think you can take the best of that stuff and then, which is I think what I'm trying to do, take the best of that stuff and then like the best of pulp stuff and try to put them together.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm thinking even I love the idea of, I mean, I think you're right with the pulp literature of the early 20th century became Hollywood essentially.
Mhm.
And then they were hiring the writers. And like you said, yeah, some of these guys were basically blue collar guys cranking out novels for like a penny a page, Shakespeare
Right.
style, like
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
broke,
Yeah.
but like this is what they're doing all the time. And yeah, I think that's true. I mean, you think even like I like those like crime procedural, police procedural shows. Those
Mhm.
all got birthed out of the noir, the pulp
Yeah.
genre.
Oh yeah. No, it's
So
all like
the
Black Mask.
biggest,
It's all like
right?
descendants of Black Mask magazine, basically. Yeah. Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, SVU, CSI, these kind of things like it's almost exactly a pulp setup. Every single
Mhm.
episode, a little mini pulp story with the dead
Yeah, it
body
is.
or
Right.
the
Yeah.
crime.
Yeah.
And then they're
Yeah.
piecing
Yeah.
together the evidence, and there's a real beauty to that formula and how you subvert the formula and all of that. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
I mean, I'm a big Ross McDonald fan of those pulp greats, and
Mhm.
he was a literature professor before he started
Right.
got his claim to fame. And he wrote many essays that are very interesting and still hold up listeners, saying some of the stuff similar to Brad, saying, yeah, that there's an American tradition, probably starting with Edgar Allan Poe and going back there. And you can see it kind of evolve over 100 years and kind of get to where it is. And when he was writing, in the 50s, 60s, and just very interesting how, yeah, there's something almost like similar to the cave where if there's
Mhm.
this unknown thing, if there's this unknown thing that just draws us in. Did you ever watch? I mean, it's a kind of a not a huge Outer Range on Amazon Prime with
I did
Josh
start
Brolin
to,
and
yeah, I did. The oddly enough, I remember that coming up, and it seemed really similar to a short story I had just finished, and I was like, I can't watch this. I'm
yeah,
gonna like, so, it's that show is right up my alley. Like
yeah.
as a premise, that's what I should be watching, but I
Because
just,
it just does, I just use an example just because it's perfect. Like it kind of does that. It's like, oh, it's normal. It's supposed to be realism in this kind of, whatever Montana, farm community. And then all of a sudden this hole just appears in a field and nobody, and then like a time travel portal portal and nobody really knows, and it's like a secret,
Mhm.
and then everybody starts finding it, and it just leads to these little things that it was so. I mean, the first season's really good. The second season isn't as good, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just thinking of that, I
Yeah.
was thinking of
No,
just
that's a perfect
these
example as far as I
traditions,
know. Yeah.
or even I don't know if you watched that Netflix. I only bring it up because I'm watching it right now. The Dark, that German show on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good show for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
I'm
I like that
almost
quite a
done.
bit.
I have a couple
Yeah.
episodes left. I keep falling asleep trying to watch them at night here,
Yeah,
but
it's cool. It's cool. It handles time travel a bit differently than
exactly.
most other stuff does.
And
It's
it's just
it's genuinely scary.
this
Yeah.
little cave that's just like
Yeah.
in the neighborhood, and kids
Yeah.
playing it, but also if you go deep enough, there's something under there that,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
rips,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's yeah, there's just something so appealing about that too.
Mhm.
All it just appeals to our sensibilities in a way that I love that
It-
yeah, I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah.
Dude, and this is the thing is it's like it's not even what I love about the fact that it does appeal to people, and like I see it appeals to you and it appeals to people I talk to, and this is kind of the reason I wrote this book set in the sewers, not only because it was something I had experience with and it like struck me a certain way, but I'd be at like I've talked about this on other podcasts, but I'd be at like a over at a friend's house drinking a beer or whatever, starting to talk to somebody, and I would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'd say I spent all day in the sewer, and you could see that their eyes would just open up a little bit and they'd lean forward a little bit. And I was like, oh, there is something here. Like, if I make this cool, this will be a good book because there's something that genuinely appeals to people. They're a little bit disgusted, a little bit afraid, but they want to hear
Yeah.
more about it, right? But this thing about going down this part of the point of this book is that goes back forever.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there's something deep, deep, deep in us as human beings that is a little bit freaked out about underground, a little bit fascinated, a little bit like mystified. We do think something sort of quasi-spiritual or divine or something is down there. I mean,
Yeah.
in the West, we put hell down there. That's not
Yeah.
for no reason at all. We bury by. I was fascinated by. I sort of briefly mentioned in the book, and it's not necessarily pertinent to the plot, but I mean there's a place in South Africa, Rising Star Cave, something Star Cave, where a team of anthropologists have found what is thought to be the first hominid burial site, and it was these hominids called Homo naledi, and the Homo naledi is like 4 foot tall, not a human by any means, but
Right.
perhaps in the lineage they might be our ancestor or more like a
Early
sort of
ape
cousin.
evolution, or yeah.
Right. And it's, a few 100,000 years ago. And they were apparently taking their dead deep down into this cave. It's like 60 feet. And then down into this cave, you have to climb up this other slope and then lower the bodies down again into this, like, into the floor of this deep, deep, deep cave. Um, why were they why not just throw the bodies in the river?
Right.
Right? Or just set it out, let the hyenas eat it or whatever. Like,
Right. Or
what was
burn
going
it,
on
or
there?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To them it was super important, and it's also important to us. I mean, we have a lot more cremation and stuff like that now, but I think in our heads it's still. I mean, I know a lot of people friends of mine whose parents or whatever, they've had their remains cremated, but then they bury the
Right.
cremains. There's something in our heads like that's what we're supposed to do with it.
Right. Yeah.
And that yeah, so that ties into all these other appeal about the caves. Of course, there's cave art, and a lot of the sort of proto religions seemed to treat the cave as a sacred place as well. So yeah, I'm trying to like just catch a little bit of that energy in my little sack here to write this novel. And I don't know that I explain it. I don't know if anybody can really explain it, but
Well, yeah, I mean,
um,
these are huge questions. Yeah, that's what, but
yeah.
it's interesting to go in, and I just like to hear everybody's thoughts on it, because there is something inherent about it, and it is so hard to kind of put our finger on what exactly it is that draws us in.
Mhm.
And so, I
Mhm.
mean, this is, I have listeners sick of hearing it. This is why I always bring up Stephen King, because he's so good at drawing you into something like this. Even
Oh
something like
yeah.
It or something, yeah, where you're going into the
Yeah.
sewers, there's something in the sewers, and like this
Yeah.
that's been there for centuries, and it's been cursing this town. It's just something so
Mhm.
appealing about
Oh
that
yeah. Oh,
oh
and like it probably I haven't read it since I was a kid, but that's probably the biggest influence on this book is it, I would
yeah.
say. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Really?
I don't even think I realized that till I was almost done.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. That's great. Yeah.
But in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's not, it doesn't have the kid angle. It doesn't have the serial killer clowning. There's a bunch of stuff
Right.
that's in
Yeah.
it, that's not in this book. But like, I really think about like, what might I have read at some point in my life that like most directly ties to this? It's probably it,
Dude, I mean,
which
even
is,
that novel, like when you read that first chapter, which is usually the first scene in all the movie adaptations, is
Mhm.
Georgie taking his boat and he sees the clown in the sewer. When you
It's
read that,
terrifying.
it's just very short. It's like 7 pages or something. That very
Mhm.
first chapter, it's one of the best first chapters he's ever written.
Mhm.
Like it draws you in
Yeah.
so much, and you're just like, what's in that sewer? Like what's
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
sewer here?
Well, and then
And
the whole idea and it like from there, it's like, well, we're gonna find out at some point in this story. Like on some level, your mind knows you're gonna find out what's down there, right? And that just pulls you along throughout all the ups and downs of the story. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. Again, listeners chime in with that too. What do you think about sci-fi pulp and all that kind of stuff? And then blending the two. Let's touch on the blending. Was that just, did you set out to blend the two, or it was just something that naturally happened as you were composing, like,
Yeah. I'll tell you like what my sort of meta project style wise is, and this hasn't always been the case, but this is something I'm sort of figuring out, is I want to do like conceptual speculative stuff at the highest level, but also at the highest level I can manage. But a lot of my favorite like conceptual sci-fi or whatever stuff, the sentence by sentence writing and the sort of interiority and some of my favorite aspects of like really good quote unquote literary fiction is sort of absent. And so my sort of objective is to try and make both of these things happen in the same space, right? Like, like why can't a Twilight Zone episode be written at like the level of Faulkner?
yeah,
There's really no reason why it can't, you know.
dude, some of those you could
So,
argue. I mean, shit, some of those Rod Sterling written ones, I mean, they
oh
do
yeah, they're
rival some of
bangers,
the,
dude.
yeah,
Yeah.
the dialogue and stuff is impeccable.
It's
Yeah,
very good.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, man, this was
So,
for a 30-minute TV show in like the 50s or whatever, and it's
right,
great.
right.
Yeah, it
He
holds
just
up.
smoked 120 cigarettes and just locked himself in a room and didn't come out till it was done. Yeah, yeah. But so that's kind of because I love both of those things so much, and I do think, and then on the flip side, I do think, I mean, at some point I stopped reading the fiction in the New Yorker and the Paris
Right,
Review, and I stopped reading whatever it is that wins the Pulitzer on a given year. Not that there's nothing good in there, but like
right.
for me, the hits to miss ratio is just not strong enough. So to me, like some of that stuff could use an injection of like actually interesting conceptual occurrences, right? Like, can you
Yeah.
make me actually think about something other than my divorce or whatever by the end of the story?
Right.
You know, which I haven't even had one. Why am I
Yeah.
got to read so many stories about people getting divorced? I mean, but so I think that's the idea. It's like generally I feel like I see a little bit of a lack in the sort of the again, I don't know what to call it. What do we call this? Like, because the word literary seems like it doesn't quite say what it used to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
Stuff written at the sentence to sentence quality that might win a Pulitzer Prize or a
Yeah.
National Book Award or something like that. But
It's always
injecting it with
telling.
a little bit of pulp craziness.
I said it's always telling when you look at the bestsellers or these kind of, Gone Girl kind of, I mean, those
Mhm.
are kind of a ancestor or,
Yeah,
kin to the
yeah,
pulp genre. Like, yeah,
Gone Girl's totally contemporary pulp. And that's
yeah,
not dismissing it at all.
right,
That's what it
yeah,
is. And I think that stuff is probably Gone Girl because there is sort of money in it now. I think the quality has gotten
right.
better probably on a sentence by sentence level, but it's still I think I think we can do even more, I guess.
Yeah, and then you think of something, I'm even thinking of like, that huge deal that Ryan Johnson has had with Netflix where he's just writing these kind of pulp, 2.5 hour pulp scripts. Some are better than others, I mean, like I've
Mhm.
watched all of them but like it's like, okay, well, this guy who's also really into sci-fi and stuff is
Yeah.
just doing these kind of classic detective style movies that are huge budget, huge casts and stars,
Yeah.
and he's doing them
Yeah.
for like 2.5 hour movie
Right.
runtime. Like
Right.
that's
Yeah, it's wild. And they're
yeah,
basically like Gonzo Agatha Christie or something,
yeah,
really,
yeah,
when you really break them down. Yeah.
yeah. Drawing
Man, they're
room
not
kind of
bad. I
yeah.
don't love them, but they're good. Like
I'll
they're
agree. Yeah,
watchable.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not like the best. But you can tell. I mean, I think in the latest one that I would there are even direct references to kind of classic pulp novels and
Oh, is
things like
there?
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like cause the locked room mystery kind of style of okay, everything's locked. How do we know? And it's a little corny, but yeah, it's still it's watchable. Yeah, I didn't mind watching, spending 2 hours with that story and seeing what happened and
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I was just thinking of examples in modern day where we're still obsessed with these genres, despite even like maybe the low status in terms of like the like you were saying literary awards and stuff. But yeah, yeah.
It's still what the people want in a lot of ways,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
And you even
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
literary authors kind of leaning into that right now because one,
Hmm.
probably because of the financials, right? You can make more money doing a
Yeah.
more popular kind of story that everybody likes, like an SVU
Yeah.
style.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. You
Yeah,
know.
I do too. I do too. Well, I realize like if just kind of thinking in terms of like what's on streaming and movies and stuff to watch, it's like I'm finding less and less new stuff that appeals to me. And I don't want
Yeah.
to just do this like all movies suck now. I don't really
Right.
think that's necessarily true, but like I pay for premium YouTube, right? Mostly I did that to listen to music because it's better for
Right.
listening to music or whatever. And then I realized that YouTube has just been dumping all these movies on.
Yeah.
And because I have a premium membership, I don't have to pay for ads. And dude, their library of free stuff, anybody can listen to it, or watch it. You just have to watch some ads.
Right.
Their library is way better.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
Than Netflix's. And it's
Yeah.
because they just mined like all the good 80s, 90s, and 2000s stuff that people actually went to see. That's all they
Right.
did. And you're like, you'll go through there and it's like, oh, Cape Fear is on here. That's a great movie. Like, it just one after the other. And they got a bunch of crap in there too,
Yeah.
obviously. But their selection's just way better than Netflix because Netflix is like trying to put out the best new thing and
Right.
they've got some algorithmic way for generating these movies um where they're made to watch while you're scrolling on your phone so everything is like kind of stupid
Right. Yeah.
and they all look the same yeah, so it's something is shifting. I can sort of feel
Even,
it.
I mean, I don't even pay for the YouTube, but even sometimes, like when you're looking for some like an older movie, that they have a better selection than like Criterion, and like because they just have all
Sometimes.
the old ones that are in public domain now, basically.
Yeah,
They're like
yeah,
over a
yeah.
hundred years old, so you
Yeah. Well,
just
and
go watch them.
there's production companies. There's some older production companies that have just started dumping their movies on YouTube because whatever.
Right.
They'll get the penny for ad revenue if you watch it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
single penny you get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I wanted to ask about self-publishing now, and you are
Sure.
well versed in this and have had success with it. I wanted to ask you, not just the decision, but the process
Yeah.
about this. It was over a year-long process. I just wanted
Yeah.
to ask, how many publishers did you go through before you decided? I was keeping up with some of your tweets as you documented this, this
Yeah.
frustrating process. And
I did get a little pissed off a few times for sure and
I
a
mean,
little hopeless.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
understandable, man. But I think,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I think listeners are curious. How many did you go through? What were the emails like? Because this is the
Yeah.
nitty-gritty of the
Yes.
long, arduous process of getting
Right.
people to do
So
it.
so So my philosophy up until now, like up until some point in the last year or whatever, has been, well, try to get it as placed as highly as you can first, and then like work your way down the chain, right?
Right.
So like the idea is like, okay, maybe, let's pretend that this would end up at Penguin Random House. Well, what do you do? What do you do between now and then to get there? And that means find an agent. I don't have an agent. So I'm blind submitting to all these. Probably. I had submitted to a bunch of agents for House of Sleep, and when I did House of Sleep, I probably submitted to like I don't remember what 70 something
Right.
like that,
Yeah.
and came out way with like some small number, probably in the single digits of um, agents who were interested in who responded that they wanted to read the full manuscript. So those people, I sent them the Earth and Dark as well, plus a bunch of others that I found and really got nothing,
Right.
no interest whatsoever. Most I shouldn't even say no, like most of them I didn't even get responses from. I got responses from a few that said, no, this is not for us. I might have got
Which is
one
the
or two
norm.
that were,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
the norm
yeah,
to not hear
yeah.
anything. Yeah.
They don't, they're picking almost nothing out of the
Yeah.
slush pile, like very little. You might get an enterprising, like young agent who's like starting and trying to build up their career who maybe will actually pay attention to the slush pile, but for the most part, nobody's actually looking at them. Um, so that process, I let that process play out for like 6 to 8 months because you got to wait for responses
Yeah.
to see. And then I started going to presses that would, you don't need to be agented, which
Right.
is, smaller presses. And smaller presses are great. I mean, there's a lot of them that are doing awesome stuff. And then I did start getting some interest there, but then like by the time the conversations ended up like getting to the point, it was like, well, we could get it on our 2027 slate. Now, meanwhile, I finished this in 2024.
Right.
Um, and I understand that they can't just turn around and we'll put this book out next
Right.
week. I totally get that, but it's in the internet age, 3 years is too long to wait to put a book out after it's done. It's already done.
Yeah.
So I just decided like I'm not waiting that I'm gonna have a I'll probably I'm hoping to have two more books out by then, right after this
Right.
one. So like what do you mean 2027? So so yeah, I ended up I mean I did get, maybe like this might be interesting for people to hear, and I don't want this to sound like complaining or anything, but just like maybe this story means something to somebody out there and they then find it helpful. I got real like, screw it. I'm not gonna put it out. Who cares? Who cares?
Right.
I'll just write some stuff on my own, whatever.
The
Like, screw it.
frustration, the
Yeah.
discouragement. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just, who cares? What did apparently I wasted my life on trying to be a good writer. And
This is all a part of it. That's all a part of it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then like also just like, well, fine, I guess I wasted my life, but this is what I do, so I'm just gonna write stuff, and I
Right.
won't even put it out. Um, and then I had in the midst of this, had uh I had a mystical experience, we'll say.
Oh, here
If
we
you want to
go.
know more
Yeah.
about that, we
Yeah.
can talk about that. And in that experience, it became very clear to me that uh, I needed to stop being a little bitch. Um, and which is usually how my mystical experiences are, when I do have them. Uh, and I just decided that I'm just gonna take control of this to the extent that I can. I'm never blind submitting anything ever again. Just not. If I have a friend who has a press or somebody
Right.
comes to me, that's a different conversation. But I never blindly submitting anything to anybody again. And yeah, I'm just taking just so that meant like, all right, we're just self-publishing this thing. We're gonna get it out as soon as, and I came home from that experience and started putting the cover together, you know. Um, so and since then have just been like hyper motivated. So, but I probably needed to kind of like, I don't want to say hit rock bottom. I wasn't like wandering the streets in a drunken haze or anything, but I did have like kind of a mini
Yeah.
dark night of the soul. Like, what the f am I doing?
Yeah.
Is this, I'm like a middle-aged man. Like, and I'm like playing like this weird, like, what am I doing? But but yeah, so eventually that just like, and since I'd put out House of Sleep, I knew how to do all of the self-publishing stuff. I knew what
Right.
technically was required and was able to kind of make that all happen relatively quickly after that. So, um, I did a final proof edit, which took a little while. But then, typesetting's is pretty easy.
Right. Especially
Graphic
with the
design's pretty easy.
software nowadays. Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was, once after I had that experience, or The Earthen Dark came out within, I don't know, 2 months, I guess. And most of that was like tweaking the cover, and looking at the proof copies and
yeah.
stuff that Amazon sends you.
I
So
am curious now about the mystical experience.
sure.
Was this were
Yeah.
were you on drugs? Were you meditating? Were you just
Yeah,
kind of like
this was
standing in line at a gas station checkout and it kind of
you
hits you suddenly? I mean,
you can
what
have you can have them in all sorts of ways. This in particular was a one of my on a sort of semi-annual basis, I do an ayahuasca weekend, um, which ends up being a pretty intense experience every time. And yeah, I had some pretty clear conversations with, depending on how you interpret it, myself or something
right.
or whatever, that really, yeah, really had a pretty intense interaction there. And ultimately it came from like, stop being a whiny little bitch and just do the thing.
Right. Yeah.
Which appeals to me because I have a very much screw it and do it, screw it, I'll do it myself kind of mentality anyway. Um, but I also,
And this
when I
was
was a little
after,
kid, yeah,
like the 10-month process of, yeah, agents, then
yeah,
the like small, mid-sized press,
yeah,
small presses, and then
right,
kind of thinking, do I want to do this? And yeah, like you said,
yeah,
having this kind of existential, what am I doing?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you're just in the right headspace all of a sudden, and it kind of, yeah.
yeah,
The
yeah, no, just
perception change with those kind of the psychedelics is always interesting, and I understudied, and there are some people trying to do serious study of it now, but yeah,
yeah,
it's always
yeah,
interesting how it shifts, or
yeah.
maybe it just
Well,
makes you think differently slightly about whatever the situation, or yeah,
yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on what you're bringing to it, right? So like where you're at when you're bringing to it. And it's kind of weird that like, and this was probably part of it for me, you go in there and in that particular time, it was like, there's a guy in there who, he'd been on opiates for a long time. He'd been about 9 months clean, and the guy's just trying to hang on, man. You know what I
right,
mean? Like he's just trying to like he's good. He's good at now, but he knows that if stuff starts going off in a certain direction, he's going to be back on pills in 2 months or whatever.
right.
And then there's another guy who he lost in there who he lost his son when his son was like 8 years old to
Oh my
brain
God,
cancer,
Jesus
and he's like
Christ,
trying to
yeah,
sort his way through that. And, he's like, I'm either, and that guy actually told me, he was like, listen, man, if I don't figure this out, I'm going to blow my brains out within a
right,
year.
yeah.
Like it's that or I can't handle this, right? So then like my problems seem pretty friggin' small. Oh, nobody
Right.
wants to publish my weird book.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so, so that was part of it, was just like, stop, like, you don't actually have problems in the grand scale of
Right.
things, right? So you don't get to complain anymore. Um, so that was part of it. But then also just like, yeah, and then also kind of intense, difficult, sometimes painful process of sort of rebuilding my confidence back up after you get a little bit inured to rejection, but I'll still, every time somebody's like not interested, there's a little bit
Yeah.
of like, ugh, yeah.
So I mean
So
that's always the normal reaction. Everyone that pretend this Gen X apathy is just not real. I don't even believe the Gen Xers felt it. Like it was always this kind
right,
of it stings a little bit. There's this kind of
yeah,
sting to the rejection, even if you are
yeah,
used to it, there's still that. And then if it happens over and over and over again for like a year as you're doing this, it's
yeah,
did you get any strange
yeah.
requests from any of the presses? Anything where they
No.
wanted to cut or they wanted you to do some weird marketing or anything like that? Or
No, not really. I mean, other until we got to like the small press, the sort of indie presses, it's not clear that anybody ever even looked at the first
right,
page.
right. That's
I
just
don't think
talk
they
about
do.
frustrating. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I don't think they even look at it on it for the most part, to be honest. Like, it, I don't know. I think what's in well, I hate painting with too broad of brushes, but I do think that the agent stuff, I think that's a line of work that probably won't exist in 10
Yeah,
years. Or
it's
there'll be a
shrinking.
few of
Yeah.
them out there, but it's not clear that they do. Like here's an example. Like if you were if you were an ambitious young agent, you would be on Substack and Twitter and etc. trying to find the next ambitious young writer who hasn't had their opportunity yet.
Right.
And that's literally there's you ne I'm on Twitter and Substack all friggin' day. You never ever ever see that. So they don't they're basically trust fund kids that have an apartment in Manhattan someplace, and they got four clients that they barely pay attention to. They're not interested in finding, they're not really interested in doing much of anything as far as I can tell. So I'm sure there's exceptions to that out there, but
Right.
speaking generally, that seems to be what's going on. So
I remember for one
um
of mine, specifically tried to target young agents.
mhm,
This is a couple years ago when I was trying to do another, one of my books,
mhm.
and it was nothing. None of the young agents responded less than the seasoned ones that I thought were out
Mhm.
of my league. Where I was
Yeah.
just like, "Hey, you're a young
Yeah.
agent. I'm trying to get my start. Why don't you take a look?" They just didn't even
Right.
seem interested. But I think you're right about how that's kind of collapsing. And I think not just in literature, but all the arts industries and even sports and entertainment that require agents. You see a
Mhm.
lot of NFL players and stuff just not even having one, using their mom or something like Lamar
Right.
Jackson or like something
Right.
like that, just like as an agent, because saves you commissions. Why am I giving
Yeah.
you 5, 10% of my pay here? What are you
Right.
actually negotiating for me?
Right.
And it's
Right.
literature. It's like the agent's supposed to be the asshole, so you don't have to be, during the kind of
Right.
that's what you're paying them for, but then they're not even doing that for you. I've seen
Right.
screenwriters that are just straight up, they have, maybe these are, the exception is maybe a more seasoned screenwriter that has connections. You can just, send some texts or some emails. You don't really need an agent to get you work anymore,
Right.
the way the
Right.
tech has changed with emailing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're cutting them out. And then I guess the strikes had something to do with that in Hollywood and all. But it's across the board with like the middleman kind of professions, like an agent. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're definitely people are kind of looking at them and be like, you need to justify your existence now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what are
Like,
you doing?
what are you doing? Yeah. Yeah. I
Besides
mean,
taking a chunk of the money, yeah.
right. Right. I mean, there are uh there are people making some money self-publishing too. And
Yeah.
for a long time, it was basically like, all right, if you wrote like romantasy or like real like gaudily categorized sci-fi slop or something, that was the only stuff that really sold, which was basically just like one notch above fan fiction. But it's starting to be like actual like respectable books,
Yeah. Yeah.
that are just happen to be self-published that are, I don't know that anybody's getting rich off of it, but
I mean,
it's starting to be an actual
self-publishing
thing.
is now a way to get a big five deal where you see some of these people that just start self-publishing a book a year and then eventually, after 5, 10 years, start drawing attention because they're selling so many copies. Yeah,
Mm,
I mean, yeah, you there. This is the age of doing it on your own, kind of,
mhm.
and the industry doesn't quite know what to do. But I mean, obviously, they're still making money enough to exist. It's just crazy how there's I listened to Bret Easton Ellis's podcast, and he had an author on most recently, and he just listening to the episode, a couple days late or whenever it came out last week or something, and the author was just saying, like even or Bret Easton Ellis was saying he was talking to agents at like a dinner or something, and he said that even they're now saying that like TikTok's over, book talk is over, like
Mm,
it's not moving book sales like it used to. And it's like, of
right.
course, that was inevitable. And Brad and I have had conversations about this before. Listeners, go listen to those episodes on my podcast and on his, where we do go into this. Where it seemed like that was inevitable because, of course, we've been around social media enough to know that these trends kind of come and go,
Yeah.
and so that trend's
Yeah.
kind of going. Maybe something's going to replace it on TikTok or another platform. We'll see.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
likely it will, but it's just like, yeah, that is kind of changing still. It changes so fast now, and that
Right.
makes it even more frustrating when you're trying to, yeah, get your stuff out there. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
the book talk thing is interesting. I don't pretend to understand it very well, and I don't pay much attention to it, but I
right.
do know, like, I know that not that long ago there was like kind of went viral on Twitter, so where I spend more time certainly than TikTok. But some woman who was a book talker, who had thousands and thousands and thousands of followers, and she had some huge, like 6 foot stack of books she'd read in 2025, right? And it was like, I read 283 books or whatever it was. And you kind of realize like, yeah, but like she didn't even like mention a favorite author.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it was about the fact that she'd read 283, and maybe her other content's different, but the vibe I always get whenever book talk spills over into my world is just that it's just about it'd be like saying I watched 400 movies this year and everybody clapped. Like,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah. That takes a lot of time, bro. That's a lot of
Right.
not doing anything else. So
Yeah, it's like I don't care actually. So so I don't know how effective book talk is for marketing. I'm sure in some categories it's effective, but it's not going to be effective for selling a book like mine, I don't think. But maybe
it's
I'm wrong.
it's almost similar to like Twitter like 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
where like you could get a media career out of just tweeting almost, and many people did, but that's kind of over now too.
Yeah.
You have a Substack and a Twitter, and you could become working for like CBS News or something now.
Right.
Like you
Right.
just build up
Right.
a career to
Right.
be a commentator on CNN or something.
Right. Right.
You
Right.
could do
Yeah.
that, and that's just harder now. The trends ebb and flow. It's just the trend is changing, the algorithms are changing, the platform that people are using is changing. It looks like Substack's becoming the kind of writer platform in that way.
It
Whereas,
does.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. For now, and who knows what'll
right,
happen.
and
I
then
mean, this
that'll
is just
change.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, it just gets more and more obvious that you just kind of got to do the thing that you want to do. That's, not in a paying no attention to any kind of audience, but like, I don't know, find your lane and sort of figure it out and work on that. And I don't know. I feel like I guess I'm over trying to like chase any particular thing, right? Like,
right.
oh, they somebody got that. I'm gonna try to get that. And I don't. I think things are changing so fast that by the time you get there, whatever that is won't even be there.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, even the
um,
Pulitzer, like you win a Pulitzer, you get like 50 grand before
right,
tax. Like it's like, okay, like
right,
you can, depending on where you live, that could be a great to live off of. But like most people, if
yeah.
you live in
Oh,
any
oh,
major
yeah,
city, it's not enough. Yeah.
yeah. For a book you spent 3 or 4 years writing, it
Right.
sort of
And
doesn't
it's like one of
count.
the most
Yeah,
prestigious prizes you could get. You get like 50K at before tax.
yeah,
So after tax, it's like
right,
35.
right, 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 right.
So it's
Yeah,
just like, yeah, like you're not living on that. I
yeah,
did want to ask briefly about the cost of self-publishing. This is something I think listeners are
sure.
interested in. I feel it's changed even in the last few years here. You don't have to give numbers if you don't want to, but yeah, how much did you end up spending for something like this? Did you outsource anything? And in terms of costing time, hours of your life, are you running ads on
Mhm.
Amazon, anything like that in
Sure.
terms of the cost of doing this yourself?
Yeah, I can kind of run it down. So I went with Amazon KDP, not out of any particular love for Amazon, but if you go with anybody else, Amazon isn't favorable to you in their own algorithm. And I've heard horror stories about like I can't get my book on Amazon because I went with so and so. So screw it. I mean, Jeff Bezos rules the world. What am I going to do about it?
Right,
So with the Amazon KDP, which is cool because it's essentially free. So
right,
you notionally you can go from having a book to having it out there in the world for free. Um, you pay for proof copies, but they're pretty cheap. And then yeah, there's no like sign up fees or anything like that. So that's cool. But backing up a little ways, I did pay an editor who is a good friend of mine from I've known him for quite a long time now. He was teaching a poetry class that I took years ago, and um he writes nonfiction sort of in the crime genre. He writes some true crime stuff that's done really well, and he's got a sort of a noir novel coming out later this year. Just a guy whose opinion I really respect, and also who we sort of have similar enough vibes that it's not like he's trying to. If he reads my work, he's trying to make it something else.
right.
He gets has a pretty good sense of what I'm trying to do. And I'm sure he would charge a lot more for somebody coming in off the street, but I think I paid him $1,000.
Right.
Um, And he gave me really good feedback, like really actionable, direct, no BS stuff. But I brought him a draft that it wasn't like developmental stuff. I mean, I brought him a
Right.
draft. It was like, this is as good as I can do. Like,
Right.
what's wrong with this? Why isn't this, why, like, give me another pair of eyes.
Pretty much a
I had a
final draft. Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. And I had some earlier beta reader or whatever you want to call that were just people that we read each other's work, sort of a work trade kind of thing.
Right.
And I got good feedback there as well. But that was honestly probably a little bit more just like, can you just tell me if this sucks or not? Like, should I
Yeah.
keep working? Like, it was a little bit
Right.
more like that. Like, is this good at all?
Right.
Just to give me like, because I'm gonna spend 2 more years or whatever working on it. Um, so, so yeah, I guess I spent $1,000 on an editor. If you don't know somebody who's got the time to do it and who you trust, you're probably gonna have to find somebody and spend more. If and you get what you pay for,
Right.
obviously, like anything. And then cover, I I did work with Mark Wadley, who is involved with Bruiser Magazine. Cool dude. Um, but I brought him like a 90% complete concept. I mean, it's a photo I took, and I had mocked up some stuff. I know a little bit of graphic design, and I just got it to a point where it's like this. I like what this is, but it's not quite professional looking yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it might be over my head to make it as cool as it could be. So I hooked up with Mark for that sort of final mile, and he did a great job. I love it. Uh, I don't know, all in financially, I'm probably in like $1,200 or something
Right.
like
Yeah.
that total. And yeah, yeah. And then, I do have I've sent some promo copies to people. Then you got book copies of books you send to just friends
Right.
and stuff like that. I don't know how to add all that up exactly, but um
Call it
yeah, that's
another
pretty much it.
200. It's like, yeah, 1500
Yeah.
bucks or something.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, probably in that ballpark. Yeah. And then I don't pay for ads or anything. Podcasts and
Right.
tweets and
Yeah.
my own podcast are kind of the thing. I'm lucky enough now. I've got a bit of an audience on Method and Madness, and so I dropped people can go check this out if they're interested on madmethodpod.com. If you scroll back a few episodes, you'll find it's basically an audiobook of the first three chapters of The Earthen Dark just for free. And if that appeals to you, you can move over and buy the book. Um, and yeah, I'm also running a thing. We'll see. It's kind of working, but maybe it'll pick up even more steam. Um, I thought this was an interesting idea. I'm for people who are, if you want to pay for an annual subscription to Method Madness, which gives you early access and bonus content, etc. And you have a U.S. postal address, I will send you a special edition, which is signed. It includes a tarot reading with a card and like a handwritten my interpretation of what that card means for you. And then I also am including two hand-edited manuscript pages, which are like early drafts with all of my chicken scratch and notes and parts rewritten and all of that in there. And I'll just send that to you. Um,
Little
with an
Easter
annual
eggs for the
paid
fans.
subscription.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you also get all the method. I mean, you also get all the bonus stuff
Right.
for the podcast if you like the podcast. So trying little things like that, this like little testing the waters, like, does this work? Do people respond to this? And yeah,
Yeah.
this is the other side of the self-publishing. You got to try to figure out all of this stuff yourself. And I know you could definitely just put the book out, and if you don't really care about a ton of people reading it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you do want some readership, you do have to put a little, put a little elbow grease in.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't always want to do that, and I guess in a way, I love coming on chatting with you, so that's cool. But like, do I want to spend like a bunch of time thinking about this stuff? Not necessarily, but I do want people to read the book and read the next one and all that. So,
Right. And you
yeah.
said you got a little bit of compounding effect too, where this book helped move a few sales of the previous book.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see if how that lasts. I mean, that would be kind of cool if I was always selling a handful of books a month with House of Sleep, even if I didn't do any promo or whatever. But like, it might be interesting to see. It's like now if every
Yeah.
book comes out, my sort of base default rate goes up a little bit. Maybe I could be
Yeah.
drinking nicer coffee in a
Yeah.
year or two.
I mean I mean that's what the large big five used to do, where you'd have to
Hmm.
have three or four out before you'd start
Yep.
getting the kind of back sales on the previous books,
Right.
because it just interests enough people that they're like, oh, let's
Yeah.
see the other stuff, and yeah, you get that. Now you just have to
Right.
do that on your own, and so
Just
I've
do it on
just
your own.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Brad is
Yeah.
doing that, listeners. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. 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 Well, I'll have I've got we'll see how it works, but I've got a book out in 4 consecutive calendar years plan. We'll see if it actually
Okay,
happens or
yeah.
not. So,
I'd be interested about that too. If
yeah.
that when that
Yeah.
happens and what the results are.
Yeah.
And I had Matt Wall on. Go listen to those episodes, listeners. He would self-publish poetry books, and he would always
Mm.
say you only need like 100, 500 people that are willing to be fans of yours, to kind of sustain that. And he was doing something like that, putting out a book a year for a while and seeing. And I think he was said you do see it start to elevate where Amazon might plug you a little bit more because you have a
Right.
larger body of work that they can get
Right.
more sales off of and stuff. The
Right.
algorithm will start to just put you in front of people when they're searching sci-fi books or whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
It
Yeah.
just starts to take its course. If you're putting in the, just kind of like social media. Yeah, you have to put, if you post it, they will come kind of thing.
Right.
Like yeah,
Right.
you have to
Right.
constantly be posting so that people notice and see.
It's
Uh,
true. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You
same thing with
disappear for 2 days. If you disappear for a couple days, no one will notice.
well, because that's
Yeah.
where the reason I'm asking too is one, yeah, I think listeners are curious, but I'm curious too because I'm in a similar situation where I have a bunch of things where I was like, I could put this plan out and just do it with, yeah, 4 or 5 in 4 or 5 year span, like every year, just put something out and just see. Because I mean, what else are you going to do over the next 5 years, right?
Mhm.
With
Yeah.
with the current situation, and then I'm just yeah, so I'm curious to see how that works out for.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. I mean, the plan for these is they're not. It's a novel, a short story. So the first of these four is the Earth and Dark, but short story collection next year, and then a novel maybe the year after, hopefully the year after that I'm working on now, and then I've got a nonfiction thing that's
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe a third of the way done. So hopefully within the next 4 years I can have that finished off as well. So we'll see. I'm not going to commit seppuku if I don't get it, but that's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say go for it, man. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you never know what could happen with that too. You could be doing it and then 2 years in, somebody's like, hey, this guy's got 4 books out that are selling,
Right.
and then you get the last two on like a major press.
Could be.
That's what
Yeah, you never
everybody,
know.
yeah, that's what we're
Yeah.
working towards here. But all right,
Yeah.
switching gears a little bit, but not really, because this is the thing I wanted to ask you about the literary scene.
Yeah.
And this is, as some regular listeners will know, a constant theme and topic of discussion on the show, but particularly for my conversations with Brad. We've had
Mhm.
several of these so far where we're trying to get to the bottom of this, but we haven't yet. We're both trying to navigate this kind of strange scene right now that is mostly online, like everything
Mhm.
else. Uh, I don't know, and I just want to hear the kind of constantly evolving thoughts that we have, our previous collaborations. I wanted to ask, is this literary scene we find ourselves in, is it a healthy scene? Is it thriving? Is it failing? What are you
Mhm.
seeing and feeling right now about it? I feel like it shifts so
Yeah.
much, so quickly now.
Yeah, it's tough and I can't say I try to read a reasonable amount of stuff like new stuff that's coming out from like people I know on the internet, which that's what the literary scene looks like to me is people I know on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So um uh and so unfortunately I can't read as much of it as I would necessarily like. I do know there's really good stuff out there. I mean, um Andy Edwards' Crowbar, I I can't say enough good things about that book. I'll put that up against anything. Like literally any any book that comes out in 2026. Um, I doubt it's as good as Crowbar and interesting and fresh as Crowbar is. But there's a lot of other good stuff coming out too from, David Leo Rice's Squim Bop Condition that just came out. And that guy's so productive. I'm sure he's got another book coming out tomorrow. He's great doing fresh, interesting stuff. Um, there's cool stuff happening on the pulp side. I just read Frank Kidd's Medicine Woman. Really strong book. Totally looking forward to like what he's got coming next. So there's a lot of energy. J. David Osborne's Berserker Club's really really cool, and he just put out God's Fair No Better, which I haven't read, but people love. That's some crazy pulp stuff as well in a lot of ways, though. With a lot of hard-earned craftsmanship in it as well. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening. Um, to how many sort of sales this is sort of translating into, and like how much of a sort of a cultural effect this is like going to happen is going to have is not so clear to me. Like I don't know
Right.
exactly what like where it's all going, but just in the last, and maybe it's because I just put a book out, and so now I'm on all kinds of podcasts and talking to all these people. But I'm feeling like sort of a certain amount of energy.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of talent that is there's a lot of talent that is sort of grabbing its own reins and trying to do something cool. So, I don't know. I think what it takes is going to take ultimately is something from this milieu tipping over into some kind of television or film adaptation.
Right.
I think that's what's going to have to, or I guess a cover story in a major old school magazine would probably help as well. Um, but yeah, I think that's like a lot of energy burbling. New Ritual Press is doing a lot of cool stuff.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of energy sort of burbling. Also, Farthest Heaven guys, like, there's a lot of cool stuff happening, and you could spend a lot of time on reading works from these various sources, and you wouldn't be wasting any of it. Um, so I don't know if it just kind of continues under its own power like that, or this does tip over into because what I would love to see happen is that at some point there's more readership, and maybe there already is. We stop paying attention to like what Penguin Random House and the New Yorker and Paris Review are doing. Um, and at some point we get that kind of thing, that moment that happened in the last whatever years where we're like, oh wait, 10 times as many people listen to Rogan as watch CNN?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
what? Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of waiting for that moment in literature.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll happen, but I think it could. Um, so we're not quite there yet, but I think things are headed in that direction, I guess is
Probably
my ultimate
inevitable.
take.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
inevitable in terms of like we were just saying about like yeah, even if you look at the Colleen Hoover stuff where it kind of snowballed into the biggest thing here after several
Hmm.
years, self-publishing thing. I think it could be similar, maybe not as big as that because it's a kind of
Right.
a lot of different, more weird sci-fi and pulp stuff, experimental
Sure.
things and these kind of. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
talent that's been pushed to the sidelines in terms
Yeah.
of that, and
But if
it's
you get, I mean,
inevitably
if
going to
right.
boil over,
It
like
yeah,
yeah,
if you can get if you can get to the point where, guys like people I'm mentioning are selling 2,500, 5,000 copies,
right.
10,000 copies of their book, which isn't insane, but is like life-changing in terms of
Right.
career and prospects for the future. Then things will start to get interesting.
Right, then you have to pay attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you kind
Yeah,
of forcing it.
Andy Edwards Crowbar is like that now. I mean, I don't know what he's sold exactly, but I know that it's gotten boosts from some people who are a big deal, and I think it might be interesting to see what sort of happens next to that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting because and this is ongoing listeners in this kind of, yeah, how the scene's evolving and things like that because it is mostly online, which
Hmm.
everything is mostly online now.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
is kind of part of that. And then, yeah. And this goes on to the same type of thing, Brad, but like, you know, we're still in this world where it seems the whole world is constantly talking about men and what they are or aren't
mhm.
reading.
Right, right.
And I just wanted your thoughts again, a continuing conversation on the men in literature problem that we keep getting articles
Yeah,
about in the Times, the Atlantic, etc. Kind of are men not reading books? Are we not publishing books for men? Is it the
yeah,
chicken and the egg thing? Why is it
yeah.
such a topic of discussion in the last
I,
decade? It seems like this
yeah.
everything is a vague battle of the sexes now in some
Right, right.
every field. It's like this vague kind of yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
What is happening? What are you seeing? There was that article, I guess a month ago now, about men not reading fiction.
Right, right,
But then
right.
they're also not publishing, like entire genres have disappeared that men would purchase very often, like pulp, like kind of men's
Yeah,
adventure fiction type thing.
right,
Jurassic Park
right,
could even be considered kind of like a
right.
adventure
Yeah.
fiction thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. What are you seeing? What are the thoughts? How have things changed since the last time we spoke? What are you seeing?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess a couple, I am more optimistic than I've been in a little while about this sort of thing. Not that I don't know that the sort of industry is necessarily changing in response to this. I do think a lot of those articles are um, fevered grasps at straws by the publishing industry to figure out how to recapture a market that they're not making any money off of. I think
Right.
that's like part of it. But then there's also just this like general trend of like shaming men for whatever the cause du
Doesn't
jour
matter what
is.
you're
Just
reading. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's the other thing. You kind of realize it was like, men don't read, but if you do read, you're a lit bro, and that's bad.
Yeah.
It's like what, like they do this, and if you do read, how dare you read on the subway? Because then you're performative, right? It's all this really stupid, like they're not gonna let you, they're not gonna let a dude reading win in any capacity whatsoever, unless you're literally reading what your like girlfriend is reading. Like unless you literally read exactly what she's reading, it's not gonna be okay on one measure or the other. Um, so I don't know, I don't know. I think maybe, I mean, part of what I see myself as doing, particularly with the podcast, the people I'm having on, the books I'm talking about, etc., is trying to like blow on the ember of interest that men have, and not just men, but largely men, to be
Right.
honest, that they have in reading. I mean, I'm I'm a straight, somewhat masculine dude. I mean, there's more masculine guys than I am, but I'm a dude. I'm a
Right.
chud. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and literature's meant a lot to me. And I think I'm a good, I can blow on that coal a little bit, and a bunch of other people are doing it. You're doing it a bit. The agitator guys are doing it a bit, right? Blowing and sort of keeping this demand and interest up, and maybe getting some people who don't normally read to pick up two or three books this year when they haven't read a novel since high school, because it seems cool and interesting and smart and like whatever, right? And then on the other, but then in terms of actually seeing results, I mean, I would say in the last like 6 months, three or four dudes who don't normally read fiction have like reached out to me in some way.
Right.
And these aren't like internet friends. These are like people I know in real life who are like, "Hey man, I just read this book. Do you have any recommendations? I know you're into this stuff. Like, you got anything? Like, what should I read
Right.
next?" And that's never happened.
Yeah.
So, so that maybe is an indication of something, right? Like, some kind of dip, putting your thumb in the wind and like, how are things
Yeah.
going? Well, there's some dudes out there who weren't really reading at all that are starting to. If I know four or five of them, that means there's got to be thousands of them, I would
Yeah.
think. So I'm pretty optimistic. I just don't expect a sudden change in anything. I think it's a slow drift in the direction of, yes, men reading a little bit more, yes, more stuff being marketed to them, a reevaluation of some classic stuff in a positive way that isn't just like wagging its finger because it was vaguely racist in this one scene or
Right.
whatever. But actually like, hey, yeah, Robert E. Howard kicks ass. You should read that. But
Right.
also not just that stuff. Like Mark Twain is great, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff that is respectable to the sort
Salinger,
of.
the high school books they give you in high school. Yeah. Like,
I mean, they
they're all
gave you
great.
those books, and they are all great. That's why they gave them to you.
Yeah.
That The Great Gatsby is an incredible book. I mean, people have
Yeah.
differing opinions on it, but it's friggin' good. Hemingway
Yeah.
is good. Faulkner is like so. Anyway, I think things are going in a positive direction. I'm really optimistic about it. It makes me laugh more than anything when the latest men aren't reading article comes up, or
Yeah.
um, yeah, if you're a dude out there listening, is just try to pay attention to the fact that they will not let you win as a guy
Yeah.
who's reading books. You're reading the wrong books. You're reading them in the wrong way, in the wrong places. You're only doing it to get laid. Like, has anybody ever gotten laid from reading a book? I don't know if that, I mean, maybe one guy out there got laid from reading a book, but it's
Right.
not a good strategy. If you're trying to get laid, there's way easier ways than reading a book, or way more effective, I should say, than reading a book. Um, but yeah, no, I'm overall I'm optimistic. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I like that you brought up this kind of that the way you described it is perfect, and that there is this kind of slow bubbling up from the surface, and I think maybe we'll say sewers, right, from the storm
Hmm.
drains.
Hmm.
There's like some slow, and you're seeing it with these kind of, yeah, social media. There's like an uptick in particularly men reading classics, and there was a few articles about that, I think just this past week or
Hmm.
so. I couldn't stomach reading them. Like most of
Right.
these things, I can only read so much of it before I just
Right. No,
toss it
it's like men
aside.
are reading classics again, and here's why that's bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that means that there is something, and we don't, in the internet age, we never know how long these things will last. It could be very brief, it could go on for a couple years, but that means either way, you can kind of ride a wave. You can ride that little bit, even if it's a slow wave, like you said, a slow building thing that's happening, despite everything else going on. Kind of that particular cohort or that particular group is being ignored in the marketing and things. But like there is something happening that I think with reason to be positive. Yeah, be
Yeah.
positive about it. And I think there's just a little bit of a sigh of relief in the kind of, this is the thing that makes people like you and I in our podcast kind of on the outside of this, whereas like we're willing to talk about the kind of political things that are causing this. And there's a little bit of a fatigue, I think. And I know people say this all the time when they're talking about elections, but I think it's broader than the election stuff. I think it's just like the cultural political stuff that we've lived through the last decade is starting to recede. And then of
Yeah.
course there's always a big article that comes out about some crazy woke thing. And of course that's
Mhm.
still going on. But like it is the broader culture, I think, is starting to recede from that little moment we had, back peaking in around 2020 to
Yeah.
2022-ish. There is a
Yeah.
little bit of recede happening, and then that leaves a little room for something like this to bubble up and slowly start to take its rightful place back, and kind
Right.
of so yeah, there's reason to be positive, and I think yeah, you're right. It's just a lot of noise. It's a lot of this. I mean, I talked about this with another guest, again, farthest heaven guest, Audrey Lee, where we
Mhm.
were
She's
talking
great.
about this, yeah, with this kind, yeah, and go listen to her on Brad's show as well, listeners,
Mhm.
yeah. And there's something about this thing that we're going through with this kind of like you said, there's always this kind of punishment, this kind of, oh, it's the wrong way to read or something. But actually, you can't stop this because it's just people are going to find good books that they like and they're going to keep reading them, even if it's a small market. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think this is what I mean. Brad and I talked about this before. This is why I think the industry's making a mistake to chase all of these trends, chase a couple trends at a time, that you think could
Yeah.
be good investments over the long haul or even just over a 3 to 5 year, span. But like when you're going all in on book talk or something, yeah, and then all of a sudden that's kind of fading. It's not moving books. It's like, well, now what's next? Maybe it's something like this. It could be men reading classics and writing in the, realm of trying to contribute to those classics. Like, I mean, everybody complains about, oh, nobody's writing the next Anna Karenina or War and Peace or these huge tomes, right? Nobody's doing that. Yeah, nobody is because one, there's not much of a market for it, and two, that's
No,
really hard. That takes a lot of
it
time and
is.
effort.
Yeah.
So if you spend 10 years of your life writing something like that, you're not going to get paid for it. You're not going to get, is it really worth it? So then I don't know, maybe that's changing too, where people are more interested in these big epic stories where it takes a lot of time and maybe we're going to have a little bit more patience for it or I
Maybe
don't know.
that'll happen. Yeah, I mean, I see this thing that I'm talking about. I see definitely happening in the sort of 200 to 400 page books range.
Yeah. Yeah.
This because of the reasons you say. I mean, it's and there's no yeah, it will be interesting to see if some big, epic door stoppers come out of this sort of space. And I suppose a few have, though I don't know. I'm thinking of that guy Mark De Silva's book, which I haven't read. I suppose there are a few, but that will be interesting when we get our Infinite Jest or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Just kind of like picking up where it was almost cut off because of the political
yeah.
cultural like that was happening with DFW and stuff in the early 2000s, this kind of maximalist
Mhm.
style and a rejection to the minimalists of the 80s and the early 90s there, and then it kind of getting the Gen Xers to do that kind of maximalist thing, and then it was kind of cut off as it was like becoming a thing, and then we went to this, oh, people's attention spans, so the 200 to 400 page books are all we can put out.
Yeah.
um, but then I don't know, man. I mean, I just read a bunch of John Irving books for the show, and then like you look at the stuff he was publishing throughout the 80s, 90s, the 2000s. I mean, he's regularly putting out 600, 700 pagers,
Is
and
he?
maybe it's because
Yeah.
he's grandfathered it, so he can get away
Mhm.
from that, get away with that with being, an icon of American literature.
Yeah, publisher's not going to tell him to
Yeah.
chop it in half. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't McCarthy's last book quite long for him.
Well, no, there were two. I mean, there was two books, so there was that, but they weren't. They weren't particularly long. The Passenger was less than 100 pages,
Oh wow.
so
I don't know
pretty
why I thought
sure.
they were
Yeah.
huge. I guess because they were two and they were like the that novella
Yeah.
and the
Yeah, I think if you put them together, it's probably in the 500 to 600 page range, maybe.
yeah,
But
which is
yeah,
long for him. Yeah, he usually does
yeah,
like 300. Yeah, tight
yeah,
little 300.
right,
But
right.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's better to be optimistic than it is to be pessimistic because just
What are you
it's
gonna do?
better energy to
Yeah,
produce with, you know, like what do you oh
yeah,
if you're pessimistic, it's eventually going to lead you to stop
right,
trying.
right. Yeah, yeah. Now, this does not mean that I'm not like full of spite and rage and
Right.
ambition. It
Yeah,
just
yeah.
means that it just
Yeah.
means that I'm trying to use it productively.
Well, I mean, that's a real
Yeah.
thing too. I think a lot of people get discouraged, and I've talked about this with Aaron Berry, aka Jasper Cylon, and this kind of stuff where he was saying this there is these something about how if you get too preoccupied with how bad it is, like you're not going to produce anything, or you're going to produce something that's even too maybe rejecting that premise too much even, and it hurts the work. You're rejecting the
Yeah.
status quo a little too much. It's
Yeah.
and I see that in some of the alt lit stuff too, where it's so gung ho about rejecting it that it kind of loses the plot. Because now you're not talking about the work anymore. You're talking about the larger cultural moment, and that is much
Right.
harder to capture. It's much harder to write within, instead of just focusing on your things. And
Yeah.
it's crazy how
Yeah.
that's playing out. But yeah, I like the positive angle more than anything else. I mean, every
Yeah.
article is pessimistic. Everything,
Right,
yeah,
right. No, get after it. Yeah, and also like I'm so sick of having like
yeah,
I understand statistics. All right. I have an engineering background. I understand statistics. I know how to read them. I know what they're saying, whatever. But I don't, I've sort of giving up on interpreting the world through them, being like, oh, well, there was a 7% increase in, dudes between 30 and 40 reading or not, or what. Those don't really mean that much. There's always more to that going on than so don't like buy into statistics. If something says, and every week on Twitter, somebody's like presents the graph of like nobody's reading anymore. That's
right.
probably true to some extent. I'm not even saying the numbers are wrong necessarily, but like that doesn't necessarily tell you how the energy is sort of moving out there in the culture.
And I wonder how much social media has kind of destroyed statistical like gathering, like the
Oh
data.
yeah.
Whereas if you miss a certain pocket of the online world now, because everything's in these little pockets,
Right. Right.
then you skew the data to one
Yeah.
direction, and it
Yeah.
just, yeah, you're missing part of the picture. And then that's not just literature listeners, that's every field now because of
Right.
these little, the little clicks, the circles or whatever that you form
Right.
online.
Right. Yeah, because well, like 100% of my mutuals online read. So
Right,
what does that mean?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But all right, that was it. That was the update on Brad Kelly. Brad
All right.
Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Listeners,
Thanks for
The
having
Earth and
me, man.
of course, dude. These are always great. The Earth and Dark out now, listeners, is linked below. Grab a copy, and House of Sleep is linked down there too, as well as Brad's Substack and his podcast. Go check them out. Go subscribe, buy a copy.
Yes, please do.
Brad Kelly, until next time, my friend.
All right, man. What a pleasure.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No!
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources. American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire
see the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.